Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Football Channel. Our mission is to prepare you for your draft and help you crush your league mates this season. I'm Kyle, and with me is Adam. We are the Schluter Bros. Thank you for tuning in as we dive into the latest NFL action and its impact on your fantasy season.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. Welcome, everyone. Happy to be here on this beautiful Sunday. First off, what's on tap today? We're going to start down with just any of the most recent free agency news, market news, things that are shaking in that area. After that, we're going to dive into our team breakdown. Today, we are breaking down the good old Jets. And without further ado, we're going to go from there, folks.
Sounds good. So let's hit up some of that major drama and get a little bit caught up here. The groundbreaking, earth-shattering Hold My Beverage news. Free agency, Justin Fields to the Jets. Bye-bye, Mr. Rogers. We'll dive deep into the Jets here later in the show. And who got the bag? Josh Allen and Saquon Barkley. Josh Allen secured $330 million contract extension with a deal that includes $250 million guaranteed money, the most ever to any NFL player. Great player, phenomenal for fantasy for many, many years. He's just got to get over the hump and get his team to the Super Bowl. Comments on this, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, money well spent, money you absolutely had to spend. I mean, there's far greater quarterbacks in the league than Josh Allen. To your point, he's got to get over the hump of the old Kansas City Chiefs. I'm sure he has nightmares about the Chiefs every time he goes to bed. But maybe someday he'll get over that hump. But nonetheless, deserving of that bag. Just an absolute joy to watch the way he runs with the football, the way he leads his team. Through different types of weapons he's had over the years. I mean, just an absolute fantasy stud. The guy with his rushing upside and his ability to make big plays with his arm, you can't get much better than that. So love that. Saquon, another absolute stud who helped reset the running back market. Those running backs over the past 5 to 10 years, their money has kind of dwindled compared to the rest of the leagues and other specialty positions. And he helped reset that a little bit, and deservingly so after a wonderful season with Philadelphia and that offensive line.
And he got himself a Super Bowl ring.
Absolutely.
Hard to complain with that.
They're sleeping easy in Philly this offseason, that's for damn sure.
So, big news there for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Congratulations are in order. Let's see if they can eventually get over the hump here this next year. And some less relevant, but still, we should discuss. Geno Smith signs with the Las Vegas Raiders. Sam Darnold joined the Seattle Seahawks. I'll pick up on Sam Darnold here. My opinion, especially for fantasy, he outplayed himself last year in Minnesota with the weapons that he had, with the coaching that he had. I would expect a little Seattle slide from him next year. What's your take on Geno to the Raiders?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more of the same with the old Las Vegas Raiders there. They needed to progress in the quarterback position, and I feel like this is either the same or regression. 2 years ago, Geno had a fantastic year with Seattle. However, last year he regressed a bit, showed some of his truer colors, what he's shown over most of his career. The Raiders had to get a quarterback, so, they had to make a move somewhere. Is this the move that's going to lead them to a playoff position? Probably not, but we'll see what they do.
Tom Brady can't also be part quarterback, part owner?
Yeah, that's what they need.
That's really what they need.
If they could get him in for
Come
a
down
couple
from
reps,
the booth.
On the 2-minute drill, just get him out of the booth, get a helmet on him, and then I'd have higher hopes for that organization that way.
Okay, I'm in agreement. We'll see if it's what they need or not. Kind of mixed on it. I don't know that they have enough weapons on the rest of that offense to be much fantasy relevant, but we will break them down at some point. Cooper Kupp also signed a deal with Seattle, so they get Sam Darnold and Cooper Kupp, but they lose DK Metcalf. Tell me how you feel about that. I think it's a downgrade for me.
I mean, yeah, a clear downgrade, and whether it's physicality, age, speed, any of the major categories that you want to talk about, it's an absolute downgrade. Cooper Kupp, minus his Triple Crown year, I think he's only had no other years over 1,000 receiving yards. largely, due to injury, but nonetheless, he's seen as a high prize, number one guy, and he was that for Stafford. Is he going to be that for a new organization with a new quarterback? I highly doubt it. I think his good years are behind him. I wish him the best of luck over there in Seattle. However, he's dwindling towards the end of his career, and I think we're going to see that over the next year or two.
If there's one receiver I'm owning in Seattle, it's going to be JSN.
Yeah, absolutely.
The youth, the talent, the upside. I see Cooper Kupp now as moving into the next Adam Thielen role, where you're not going to love him. You certainly won't want to start him every week, but he will have fantasy relevance.
Sure. That's fair to say. I wouldn't want to own him, but he'll definitely have some weeks where he produces.
And then we got another move for Devontae. He's going to have to start doing some new Taco Bell commercials. LA.
Staying out west.
I think it's a good move for him, though. That's a great offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his family's out west. That's why he wants to be out there with those Cali teams. That's why he wanted to get out there with Oakland, with Carr, and them. His family's out there, saving some flights, all that good stuff. But no, I love this move for the Rams and for Devontae. Finally gets him on a team where there is a proven veteran quarterback in there. He can do away with the Aaron Rodgers drama, he's got a badass stud in Puka Nacua right across from him. So covering both of those bad boys on that team, that is going to make some defensive coordinators shake their head late at night as they have to figure out how to deal with those two. Physical specimen, still still the best route runner in the NFL, I believe. And he still got it. Is he aging? Sure. Is he towards the end? Probably getting there, but love the move for the Rams, especially with that up-and-coming defense they proved last year, those young studs getting after it. I like this move for them. I think it was an upgrade from Cooper Kupp to him, and well done from that organization.
I like it. I like it for the Rams offense in general. I would still probably prefer to have Puka for fantasy, but I'm sure he's going to be drafted much higher as well.
Yeah, I think just due to the relationship Nacua already has in that offense as well. With that said, but there's definitely going to be some games where Devontae goes off for multiple touchdowns, multiple catches, over 100 yards. I mean, those are well within his grasp. And you get him on the right matchup for that, and you're going to be happy having him.
I agree. Yep, I agree. Especially if you can get him for a value, which I imagine in a lot of leagues you will.
Yeah.
And then Hopkins, 1-year deal, $5 million with the Baltimore Ravens. I think he could have been used a little bit better in Kansas City there on their stretch. The Ravens offense to me still runs primarily through the run game and their tight ends. I believe any extra weapon or as DeAndre, that's going to help them. Your take on that?
He's still a physical specimen. He's getting towards the end, kind of like we talked about with some of these guys. He's a physical specimen. Kansas City could have used him more. The fact that the Ravens don't have that many prominent offensive weapons, I like it for his size and his physicality on that team, and maybe to help coach up some of those younger wide receivers that are out there. I don't know if he's going to be someone I need on my starting roster fantasy-wise, just due to the lack of consistency. But outside of that, he'll definitely have some good games and ball out whenever they get him the ball.
Yeah. I like that. I probably won't be owning very many. I see him being valuable and flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. And all the ones we just discussed, I think Devontae Adams is your best bet out of those old fart receivers that still got a little bit of life in them. Devontae's your clear winner there. The other ones, we're sleeping on a little bit more.
Definitely. All right, that wraps up the free agency moves that we've got to discuss this week. What is next for us here, Adam?
We are running into our team breakdown, and we got an interesting one this week. We draw the JETS, drawing the Jets, folks. A lot of movement within this organization from top to bottom. And with that said, we're going to start with the top of the moves and kind of work our way down here. But Jets last season, 8-9 record, third in the AFC East. Overall, disappointing season for Rodgers, disappointing season for that O-line and the defense. They didn't, stick to the run game as much as I would have liked them to see. Overall, disappointment is how I view that season. I think that's how the organization viewed it as well, as they fired just about everyone in the front office as the season went along. With that said, though,
Well, I
what
mean,
they did,
It was Rogers' boys over there. You had Hackett, right? They brought in Lazard. So then they even went out last year to get Devontae mid-season to try and give him any kind of like, let's go, Rogers, let's do this.
they answered his every prayer, and unfortunately, it was
Mhm.
still not enough for those aging fellows to get the job done. But you're right; they tried. I mean, they did everything Aaron Rodgers
Oh
wanted,
yeah.
and it still was clearly not enough for him. But with that said, we're on to a new season. We're on to a really new start of a
Another new era over there
yeah
for the New
with
York Jets.
these
Let's
guys.
I'm a little more optimistic about this one than bringing in Rodgers late in his career. I
Sure.
think the Aaron Glenn move is the move for the future of this team. It's at least how I see it. Um, you can touch on his playing time there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Aaron Glenn is a Lions guy through and through, and he's been sought after from this organization from day one. And I mean, all the way back to when he was playing football in 1994. The New York Jets drafted him in the first round. So they brought him into the league as a player. He played out his career, and then they also brought him into the league as a coach. In 2012, they hired Aaron Glenn as a personnel scout. So they brought him in as a player, brought him in as a coach. And then over the past decade or so, Aaron Glenn, really grew his career, and he really grew the strongest as a Lions D coordinator in 2021 to 2024, where that was just a nasty defense that everyone is afraid to go up against due to their tenacious play and how well they pursue the ball. My goodness, it's fun to watch.
I love watching him. If you see him on the sidelines during some games, he is so fiery and passionate out there watching his defense. Like I want that guy on my coaching staff for sure.
Yep,
we know
absolutely.
he can do it with the defense. He's got the Jets experience as a player. Like he's the guy for their future. The big question mark I think is going to be the offense. Can they pull it together after all of their moves? And again, they're gonna have high hopes. They got talent on that roster. They're rebuilding the offensive line. They got Fields. They have Wilson. They have two good running backs. They're also doing some sneaky acquisitions for some younger divas out there.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And just to finish off the kind of coaching changes, they also got Steve Wilks from the 49ers as their defensive coordinator, and they brought in another Lions coach and Tanner Ergenstrand, which was the Lions passing coordinator.
Yeah.
So more of them acquiring as many previous Lions positions as they can. I like to kind of joke around and say the Jets are becoming more and more of a knockoff versions of the Lions every week. Most recently, they signed their old wide receiver Josh Reynolds, was another player that played for Aaron Glenn and some of those coordinators in 2021 to 23. So the knockoff Lions are coming in full effect here. But I do like where their head's at with some of these moves, and we'll see how it shakes out as the year goes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the fantasy relevance of this team because really that's what we want to get to here. Last year, we know the stars, Rodgers, Wilson. They brought in Devontae, Breece, Braylon. Breece finished as RB18 standard scoring, and Wilson, wide receiver 15. They were all drafted probably a little higher than those finished, so they underperformed, I would say. Breece was definitely something that, like, when you watched him play previous years, he is like just a level above all the other running backs, most of their running backs, in my opinion, like Saquon's level type thing. And last year, I just did not see that as much from him. And, a lot of that probably is the offensive line. And then, for Braylon to come in and then play as good as he did was surprising for me. The Wilson and Rodgers combo didn't work out like everybody thought. I know you had a little bit of that combo last year in fantasy. You want to have you regained yourself on these players, or how do you feel?
Oh, well, with Wilson and that passing attack, we're TBD on that yet. But circling back to that running game, like you mentioned, I think the offensive line was the main reason, the main culprit for that. The offensive line was terrible, both rushing and passing wise. Also, you sprinkle in the fact that Aaron Rodgers is trying to take over the offense and throw back shoulder fades to Devontae Adams 5 to 8 times a game. those need to be handoffs to Breece Hall, and they got away from that run game. And that run game is who the Jets are. And I think Aaron Glenn is the man that's going to come in there and refocus that offense on we're going to run the ball 20, 30 times a game. That's our staple. And then we'll make do with whatever happens outside of that once we get that play action rolling. But yeah, Breece Hall's got to be their bell cow. He's got to be the focus of that offense. And with the Diva Rodgers outside of that picture, I think that's going to help them.
So Breece finished RB18 is what we have here. And I guess he was drafted – first round running back last year, pretty much most leagues. Mm-hmm. Where are you thinking he might finish this year, and where would you be drafting him?
Yeah, those are good questions. I think he has definitely, again, top 10 RB potential. I think, in the standard league, he's still probably going to go in the first round as a running back.
Now, 1 QB, not super flex draft.
Yep, correct.
I agree.
Yep.
Super flex, I could see a little bit of a slide. 1 QB is probably top 10.
Absolutely. Yeah, for a lot of our listeners here, we run a super flex or a 2-quarterback league and also a standard one. So we'll try and be specific when we're talking about which. But for standard purposes, absolutely still go in the first round. Now, you do have some hindering with Fields in there, which we'll get more into a little bit later today. But, there's 8 to 10 carries a game that could be taken away from Breece Hall. And then the emergence of Braylon Allen, such a stud from UW, Wisconsin. Those are a 21 and a 23-year-old running back duo that could be one of the best running back duos in the league. I like Breece Hall. And like I said, with the new head coach there, I think he's going to get his looks again, which is great. But then there's the one thing that we've mentioned is the offensive line. And they're already addressing that, and they're getting that right. If they draft an offensive lineman in the first round and pick up one more free agent this year that's a stud, then I'm a lot more excited about Breece Hall's season as opposed to if they do not draft an offensive lineman earlier and they leave that free agency a little bit open, then I'm not nearly as high on wanting Breece Hall on my squad.
I think it'll be better offensive line. I know they just had another free agency acquisition as well. So I think the attention is going there. They got rid of those 2 old tackles from last year. But my biggest thing would be the amount of touches that Fields is going to get. And in the red zone, if Fields has the ability to score with his legs, I think that can take away from Breece's upside. So very talented running back. Happy to have him. I probably have him as like a top 10 finishing running back at the highest, right? Finished 18 last year. You get a better offensive line, better offense overall. I think he's got that upside. So 10 to 15 is kind of where he could probably be there. And then Garrett Wilson.
Yeah. Garrett Wilson's a super freak in terms of athleticism, in terms of his abilities. I mean, he made a couple one-handers last year that I saw. I was just like, wow, in traffic. I mean, he absolutely has the talent.
Top talent, 100%.
I don't think anyone's ever questioned that. No one should ever question that because he has it and he is the real deal. The question marks lie at the QB position at the offensive line again. Mm-hmm. And now with a new quarterback in there, there's one thing I love about the quarterback situation and that is they played together at Ohio State. So Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson had a tremendous year at Ohio State together, over 1,000 yards passing, over 12 touchdowns, I think it was. And then once that I love, they had over 22 passes in their time together that were over 20 yards long over there at Ohio State. So they're bringing those Buckeyes together and regrouping them, and I think that's a great move for Fields and for Garrett Wilson. And I know Garrett Wilson's probably happy about that. Probably a small factor in why they made this move, knowing that they had that history together, which is, kudos to them.
I agree 100%. Think they need to hopefully can rekindle their chemistry. And Fields is going to buy way more time than Rodgers. Rodgers is in the pocket. He wasn't mobile, weak tackle.
And he's going to have to.
Yes. But I do think he will, and he'll be back there. He'll be scrambling. They'll have play calls for rollouts, more of those things. And I think Wilson's going to get a little bit lost in the secondary and be harder to cover. So I see upside there. Obviously Fields isn't going to throw 400 yards a game, but I do think it will be a better fantasy performance from him this year, at least by a little bit. I wouldn't say a lot, but a little bit, I would say, because Rodgers was still a pretty accurate passer and he threw to him fairly well. I think there's a little bit more upside there. And the rest of the receivers in that offense, I pretty much do not want anything for fantasy. I like the running backs. I like Brees. I like Garrett Wilson, pending their draft position, their price. Braylon, I think I would struggle to start him any week unless there was an injury or the workload became more of what you see in Detroit, with a Gibbs and Montgomery, where it is more balanced and he's got more consistent upside. He could be a good flex or potential. His ceiling, I think, this year would be RB2. Upside pending whatever how healthy Brees stays. And that's kind of it for me on fantasy relevance. You got anything else there?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, yeah, Braylon, good handcuff for Brees, but we need to see more in action of what that's actually going to look like, especially with all the new moving parts of the offense and all that good stuff there. Yeah, no, I think you hit it on the head though. However, are you ready to talk about some Fields action?
Let's get a little more deep into Fields here. Yes.
Yep.
Lead us. Show us the way here, pal.
Yeah, absolutely. So interesting acquisition with this. I do like it overall with where the Jets are and them not really having a better alternative. I do like it. Fields signed a 2-year, $40 million deal with the Jets. Basically, he can get like $30 million in the first year, and after that, they can reevaluate what they want to do with him and their situation.
I love that contract for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Finally, someone's giving this young man a shot. Say, hey, here's the keys to the castle. Let's see what you can do. And with it not being the Bears, I think there's more optimism with that. And I think without him being cut short in Pittsburgh, I think he's got a chip on his shoulder more than just about any other player in the league right now. He's got something to prove. And speaking of that, his time in Pittsburgh was not bad. They went 4-2 in those first 6 weeks when he was their starter. He threw for 5 touchdowns and only 1 interception. Those are numbers that no one's going to hate. And on top of that, and the reason that we are going to enjoy Fields a little bit for fantasy purposes, 5 rushing touchdowns in those first 6 weeks. So he's almost averaging 1 passing, 1 rushing touchdown per week. There's 10 points right there for you. Not to mention his rushing yards, they're going to come into the mix, and then, hopefully some passing yards as well. But you at least got a 10 to 15 point floor with a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and some rushing yards there. So not a bad floor due to that rushing upside. And he's absolutely, to your point, going to have to use his legs to get himself going because they have not fixed that offensive line yet. And he's not going to be able to throw the ball as quickly as Aaron Rodgers is because he's just not that type of quarterback yet. Get running the football, get those linebackers flowing up, get some play action going, hit some receivers on the crossing routes. Let's get this guy set up for success, and that's what Aaron Glenn needs to do with him in that organization.
Yeah, and it depends really kind of how they're going to run things too. If they're going to do some read option, how much are they going to let him run? I'm visioning this more to be like more of a version of the Eagles offense where they're still run heavy. They have a good passing game. They utilize the tight end, 2 receivers. But they have also designed power run plays with Hurts. I think you're going to see a good amount of that. And obviously fantasy points, mobile quarterbacks always finish higher with their ability to score with their legs. Rushing touchdowns worth more than passing touchdowns. So from a fantasy points perspective, I like him this year. I think he's got top 10 quarterback. He's in that range with his rushing upside. I think his 4-2 record in Pittsburgh would be great. I think the Jets fans would love a start like that, 4-2.
Sure. yeah, absolutely they would. They haven't had that in I don't know how many years. I think it's interesting that you draw the comparison to the Eagles. I love that idea. The one thing that's a big difference in that Eagles have the best offensive line in the league, and the Jets have one of the worst. That's up and coming. They're trying to fix it. So there's a period.
It hasn't been good, but both of their guards are 2 of the highest rated guards in the NFL. If you look it up from the Pro Football, so if they can do something with their tackles, I think they can be much improved. And the mindset to me of Aaron Glenn, seeing what happened in Detroit, bringing that to the Jets, and the Detroit had one of the best offensive lines. So he knows, He's got that offensive coordinator, passing offensive coordinator from Troy. So I think they're going to focus on that. And if they can do that, they're going to be much improved, in my opinion. And just the physical mentality. I think that's the biggest part of it. Like, they may not be the most skilled, but I think they're going to go out there and fight every week. And I think that's the mindset that they're going to start to adopt more and more.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that rushing mindset attack, they're going to need that physicality. It does excite me to think about a little bit having Brees, Braylon, and Justin Fields in that backfield in shotgun. Let's fake it to one. Let's run a read option with the other, and let's run downhill and run some people over. I mean, the potential of that, the physicality of that could be fun to watch, and that could be exciting from a rushing standpoint. There is a little bit of love there to be had with them running the ball with those three guys back there.
Couldn't agree more. Think about last year with Rodgers, 40 years old off an Achilles injury. Yes, he's an accurate Hall of Fame quarterback. Never knocked a guy. But defenses are good. They know that. They're coming after you. He's going to be in the pocket. Those tackles were under pressure a lot. And he just didn't have all of the weapons until they got Devontae. And then even then he was an accurate passer. They just couldn't put it together well enough. And I think that added mobility gives them an extra component to this offense from the quarterbacks, where defenses are going to have to watch that. They're going to have to spy it, at times if needed. And it creates some read options and some new movement for that offense that they can utilize.
Yeah, definitely. And they're going to have to utilize it too, because defenses are going to put 7, 8 in the box, and they're going to say, try and throw the ball on us. We know you're going to try and run. So they're going to have to do some things with getting him moving, getting him outside the pocket to create some space, because defenses are going to have that safety up. They're going to be ready to come downhill. And then it's going to be up to Fields' arm at that point. Can he find the open man? Can he make the right read and put the ball where it needs to go?
Yeah, for sure. I would be curious to see how many designed pass runs, like screens and little dump outs and kind of moving pieces around. I would be curious to see how much I do. If they have the offensive coordinator from Detroit, they didn't do a whole lot of that. They were pretty run heavy, and then they had some pretty strategic pass plays over the middle, crossing patterns, and they had some deep ones. St. Brown, Reynolds. It was a great show to watch with. And that was with.
They have the passing coach from Detroit, but to your point, there are plenty of fun plays that they wrinkled in that if they can do a couple of those weapons, there's absolutely some potential there with that.
So yeah, he's a little more of a gamble at your fantasy spot, but with the rushing upside, I'm comfortable drafting him whenever I can. One quarterback leagues, obviously you don't worry about your quarterback as much. Super flex, you want them, early and often on your QBs and super flex leagues. Quarterbacks have the most points.
Let me ask you this: in a one quarterback league, is it someone you see that you're going to start confidently more than a couple weeks in Justin Fields? In a one quarterback league, is it someone that you're going to want to draft? Maybe not your first quarterback, but your second that you're going to think is going to play. You think he's going to play in a one quarterback league?
Yeah, especially if I build out the rest of my roster first and he's still there, absolutely. He's one of those guys where rushing quarterbacks have, to me, a higher floor, right? Because the rushing, one touchdown and a decent passing game, one touchdown with his legs, then it's like fantasy relevance, whereas our guy in Detroit over there, or like Rodgers, they got to throw quite a bit to have a good performance. Fields can break a couple runs, score a couple touchdowns with his legs, and that's a great performance, plus the upside. He gets a couple bombs, 20-plus yard touchdown gains to Wilson. It's upside. So I like it there. I've always targeted mobile quarterbacks. Obviously, they could get injured more. They have a higher injury risk. So make sure you do have a good backup, in my opinion. If I'm drafting him one quarterback, I got a good backup. I also like to pair, if possible, especially in a one quarterback, 2 mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely helps protect you a little bit until they both get injured, huh?
Well, then you got to go to the well, man. And it's not an injury, hurts seasons no matter what. You could have Josh Allen or whoever and they go down. That's going to hurt. A mobile quarterback that you drafted later on is going to hurt less.
Yeah. Yeah, that's valid. That is valid.
You got any other fantasy relevance on this team you want to talk about?
No, just that the Jets they gotta help out Justin Fields this offseason. In the draft, whether it's getting a tackle or it's getting that tight end, that stud tight end this year, and definitely getting a receiver in the later rounds, depending on how they do their first one or two. But I think they need to get those three positions in this draft. They need to get a tackle, they need to get a tight end because they're down Conklin, and then they got to get him some type of young, speedy stud just to help that move that offense a little bit. And I think if they do those things, they have some serious potential.
Love it. All right, Ed, Jets, work on that offensive line. Stay physical this season. We like the offseason move so far. Thank you for tuning in this week at the Fantasy Football Channel. We wish the Jets the best of luck in 2025, and most importantly, our fantasy football players. Tune in next week as we move through each NFL roster.